Hello, I'm Oscar Boyd, and in May of 2024, I spent 27 days cycling the length of Japan, a nearly 3,000 kilometer journey from the southern shores of Kyushu to the very northern tip of Hokkaido. It was an absolutely wonderful trip. I made a short film about it, which now has more than 350,000 views on YouTube, far more than I was ever expecting. And in the comments underneath that video, I got a load of great questions from people who are interested in attempting a similar cycle through Japan. So I wanted to put together this guide to some of the most commonly asked questions about my cycle. You know, how I plan my route, the best time of the year to do it, and how much the whole thing cost. I've also included a free download of all my route files for each day to help plan your own trip. So first things first, why cycle Japan? I lived and worked in Japan for about 6 years before attempting the cycle, and so I can now say with quite a lot of confidence that Japan is an absolutely fantastic country for cycle touring. The roads are amazingly well surfaced, cars are generally considerate and drive fairly slowly, and if you're careful about how you plan your route and stick mostly to the countryside, the roads can be pretty much deserted in some places. And when you do bump into people, most of them are kind and helpful. Of course, the landscapes in Japan are varied and beautiful. Food and drink is readily available from convenience stores, supermarkets and restaurants every few kilometers, and it is all incredibly high quality, so you never need to carry that much food or drink on you or ever worry about going hungry or thirsty. One of the absolute luxuries of cycling in Japan is, of course, the baths, the hot springs. There are hot springs dotted the entire way across the country, and there really is nothing better than getting to the end of a long day on the bike, especially if it's been cold or wet, and just getting into a bath and soaking your legs and letting all the tension and fatigue kind of disappear. It's brilliant. Hotels are generally very good with laundry facilities for washing your gear, and there are also good campsites across the country if you'd prefer to camp instead. There are bike shops in most big towns and cities that you come across in case you need to buy spares or have any maintenance issues with your bike, and services like Amazon can deliver it in advance to any hotels you stay at in case you need more specific gear or supplies. For example, I had to replace my cleats halfway through cycling. I didn't have any on me, there was no nearby bike shop, and so I got a new set delivered to a hotel that we were staying at a couple of nights later. You can find shops like Uniqlo in most big towns if you need to buy warmer gear or if you need new socks, for example, after 1,000 kilometers of riding. There's also a really good backup network of trains pretty much everywhere. If you need to take a shortcut or someone in your group is sick or injured, there are also really good medical facilities in Japan if it ever comes to it. The list really could go on for quite a while, but taken together, all I want to say is Japan is a very good place for both beginner and experienced cycle tourers alike. Why travel Japan by bike? I feel like if you're watching this video, you probably have an inkling of the answer to this question. But for me, cycling is just one of my favorite ways to travel. You're moving fast enough that you can still cover a really good distance in any single day, but you're still traveling at a very human speed. So, you know, if you see a moss-covered torii gate off in the forest or you smell good coffee on the air, you can quickly stop, park up your bike with very little fuss and enjoy what you found. I also think that cycling is a very engaging form of travel. You need to be alert as you ride, and that alertness means that you take in more of your surroundings than you otherwise might do traveling by car or by train. It's a great way to explore a new place or a place that you're already pretty familiar with. Do I need to speak Japanese? So this was one of the most common questions I got following my video. I lived in Japan for 6 years before attempting this cycle, so I can get by in Japanese fairly well, which was definitely useful for the trip, though I'm by no means fluent. So do you need to be able to speak Japanese to make this trip work? The short answer is no. Translation apps will work just fine if you need them, and most of the crucial information that you might ever really want is already translated into English. Does it help to be able to speak a little bit of Japanese? Definitely. Learning a few basic phrases before you go will make a world of difference to your trip. And I feel like you should just try to speak some Japanese, no matter how basic, if you can. Just a simple hello, goodbye, thank you very much, I've really enjoyed this meal. Those phrases can go a long way. I think partly it's fun just to learn a new language. You get a better sense of the culture of a place, but also you are likely to get a much warmer reception from people that you meet on the road if you put the effort in to speak a little bit of Japanese. When should I go? So the short answer to this question, if you're genuinely thinking of cycling the full length of the country, is either in the period from May to June or mid-September to November. I chose to go in the May to June period. The longer explanation behind this answer has to do with Japan's geography. So Japan runs from about 32 degrees north of the equator right up to 47 degrees north, meaning that across the islands there is a wide range of weather and temperatures that you're going to experience. The north can get very, very, very cold, and the south can get very, very hot. And this basically means there's only a limited window each year when it's reasonably comfortable to cycle at either extreme of the country. If you set off too early in the year, the north will still be covered in snow. If you set off too late, the south will be incredibly hot and humid. So I think May to June is a beautiful time, and you should get pretty good weather throughout, although still be prepared for plenty of rain, especially if you're spending every day for a month outside on the bike. September to November is also a very good time to cycle through Japan, but you are then entering typhoon season, so you will likely encounter 1 or 2 typhoons as you go, which might wipe out a day or 2 of cycling. If you can time that with a rest day, then fantastic. If not, you may have to be slightly more flexible with your plans. I'd say try to avoid kind of mid to late June to mid-July, which is the rainy season across most of Japan, and definitely avoid late July and August. It will be 35 degrees centigrade most days with very, very high humidity. Kind of in the good case scenario, this is just quite unpleasant to ride in. In the worst case scenario, this can actually be quite dangerous, especially if you're spending a lot of time going uphill, which inevitably you will do when cycling the length of Japan. A couple of people did ask me whether you could go in the middle of winter, so kind of December, January, February time, and maybe it's possible, but yeah, I mean, the main thing to point out is that if you do go in midwinter, particularly Hokkaido, but also northern Honshu and the whole section through the Japanese Alps will have a huge amount of snow. Japan is one of the snowiest countries in the world during winter. Some places get kind of 15 to 20 meters of fresh snow each year, and many of the roads will be impassable without very specific snow gear. So just bear that in mind if you're thinking about doing a winter adventure. North to south or south to north? There's quite an easy answer to this question. So if you're starting in May, start in the south. It will be a lovely temperature in Kyushu, and by the time you get to Hokkaido, there won't be any snow left on the ground or really much of a chance of fresh snow anywhere. It was still cold when we got to Hokkaido at the end of May. It was in the low single-digit temperatures most mornings, so we had warmer clothes for that specific section of the trip. If you're starting in September or October, then do the reverse. Start up in the north. It won't have snowed much, if at all, in Hokkaido, and by the time you get down to Kyushu in the south, the temperatures will once again be gorgeous and not too hot. Just a slight note of caution here when thinking about temperatures. There are a lot of mountains to climb in Japan, and even in the south it gets pretty cold at high elevations, especially if it's windy or rainy. Make sure you have a good waterproof jacket with you the whole time and some warmer clothes for the trip. We were very, very grateful to have these when we were descending some of the bigger mountains in the south. How did you plan your route? So I had a few different design principles when I was putting together my route at the very, very beginning. The first, most simple one was I just wanted to revisit as many of my favorite places in Japan as possible, string them all together with this one long cycle ride. And this knowledge was based on a long list from the time that I'd spent living in Japan. One of the places, for example, that I really, really wanted to visit were the temples at Koyasan. I was also desperate to cycle through the Kyushu Valley in the Japanese Alps, one of my favorite places in Japan. And I also wanted to go and visit some places I'd never had the chance to visit. So the shrines at Ise Jingu was one example of that. I do think this route ticks off a lot of the most beautiful parts of the country. You won't see everything. It doesn't go near Mount Fuji, for example. It skips out some of the bigger cities. I'll explain why later. But yeah, it really does show off the very, very best of Japan. Another principle I had when designing the route was that I just wanted to visit all 4 of Japan's main islands. So Kyushu, Shikoku, Honshu, and Hokkaido, right up in the north. There are versions of the trip you could do where you just stick on Kyushu, Honshu, and Hokkaido. You don't have to go to Shikoku, but yeah, some of the best riding we found was in Shikoku, and I'd always wanted to spend a bit longer on that island. To get between the different islands, we took ferries, and those ferries were also a great way to break up some of the longer days. The next and probably most important principle for designing an enjoyable route for cycling through Japan is to avoid what is known as the Hokkaido corridor. And this is the endless expanse of city and suburbia that basically runs west from Tokyo through to the cities of Nagoya, Osaka, Kyoto, Hiroshima, all the way down to Fukuoka. This is about where 90% of Japan lives, and if you cycle through here, you will encounter a lot of traffic. My route basically avoided this part of Japan entirely. It means you skip out on some of the bigger and more famous cities. You don't go to Kyoto, for example. You don't spend any time near Tokyo. But the result is the cycling is much, much more secluded, and we encountered far fewer cars as we went. And the final design principle has to do with geography and weather. So the south and east coast of Japan are generally sunnier and drier than the north and west coasts due to the prevailing winds bringing a lot of rain from the Sea of Japan. And that rain falls over the mountains in the north and the west. Where possible, I tried to map the route to stick to the south and east coasts, though I didn't always follow this rule and had some of the most amazing cycling of the trip on the northwest coasts of both Honshu and Hokkaido. If you would like to download the full route of my cycle, all the GPX files for all 27 days, I've put a link in the video description. And just a quick note before you use it, during rainy season and into typhoon season, many mountain roads do get washed out by flooding. There can be some quite severe landslides. Most are repaired quite quickly, but some are just left to nature. I can't promise that our route will work forever, and you should use the GPX files more as a guide, not an exact turn-by-turn set of directions. We were also really happy to meander and get lost in the mountains if necessary. There are definitely much more direct versions of the route that we took if you want to cut off some distance and probably some climbing as well. How did you find good roads? So obviously when you're planning a 3,000 kilometer trip, it's nigh on impossible to scope out every single route in advance. So I initially used Google Maps to get a rough sense of the distance between the hotels and the different places I wanted to visit. I was trying to average about 100 kilometers per day on this trip. I thought that was pretty manageable, just in terms of distance and climbing, but also with all the filming that we wanted to do. Some days we did a little bit less, some days we did a little bit more. Once I had that Google map, I then made routes on Strava, which I preloaded into a Garmin for the directions for each day. And then when it actually came to cycling, I used those directions on the Garmin, but I also had Apple Maps running at the same time, which was giving us cycle directions. And that combination was actually fantastic. Apart from a few dead ends, Apple Maps generally gave us quieter alternative roads, while Strava was trying to push us onto the quicker and busier roads. And we basically just used a combination of the two. If we needed to go, quicker and cover some more distance for a couple of hours, we would take the Strava route. If we wanted to get away from cars as much as possible, we would divert onto the Apple Maps route. I'd say prepare to be flexible and just have some fun with it. Some of our best moments came from following these obscure windy detours up into the mountains where there were no other cars or people for miles and miles on end. At this point, I do want to give a shout out to Japan's tunnels. Japan loves to build tunnels, and they can cut a huge amount of elevation out of a day if you do follow them. Most, but not all of the tunnels have a narrow sidewalk or a pavement that you can ride down. If you're lucky, then some of the better, more modern ones, they will have a wider pavement, which is great for cycling. And then, unfortunately, there are some tunnels which just feel like death traps and are basically impossible to avoid. Double check your route to see what tunnels you'll be taken through. Not all tunnels are navigable by bike. Final note on tunnels, just make sure you have some lights or ideally some high vis clothing as well. Some of the tunnels, again, the modern ones are pretty well lit, but some of them can be really, really dark and have almost no lighting, and you just want to be seen as clearly as possible by the oncoming traffic or the traffic coming from behind you. You are sharing the road with cars, but also by big trucks, and you just want to be seen so you don't get hit. When it comes to starting and finishing the ride, the nearest city to the start in the south is Kagoshima, which has both an airport and a bullet train station. From Kagoshima, you can take local trains south to get within a few kilometers of the start line, either at Cape Sata, which is the southernmost point of mainland Japan, or at Mount Kaimon, which is where we started our ride. The nearest city to the finish in the north is Wakkanai, which also has an airport and a train station. From Wakkanai, you'll have to cycle about 30 kilometers one way to reach Cape Soya, the northernmost point in Japan. What gear should I bring? I'm not going to bore everyone to death by listing everything that I took on the trip here. So if you do want a fuller gear list, follow the link in the description. That's on my website. But a few quick things to know. A lot of people have asked what bike I was riding for the trip. I was on a Cannondale CAD 13 road bike with 28mm tires, and it was perfect for this trip. There was very little of it that was off tarmac, and I didn't get a single puncture the entire way, even though I was weighed down with saddlebags. I would say that one absolutely essential bit of kit for Japan is what is known as a bike bag. By this, I mean a thin foldable bag that you can put your bike into. In Japanese, this is known as a rinko bukuro, and you can buy one from the nationwide hiking store Montbell for about 5,000 yen or so. This is the one that I have, and it served me very, very well on the trip and on previous cycle trips I've done in Japan. And the reason that you want one of these bags is that if you ever want to bring your bike on a train, then you definitely need to pack your bike away in the bag. And sometimes hotels will ask you to put your bike in the bag before you bring it inside. Japan does have very high standards of cleanliness, and having one of these bags can help you out a ton, particularly if you've been riding in the wet or in somewhere that's muddy and your bike's a bit dirty. If you can put it in a bag instead, and the bag is nice and clean, then they'll just be much, much happier to have you as their guest. What about food and drink? So you will probably be unsurprised to know that the food is one of the great joys of cycling in Japan, and the country has a well-deserved reputation for the quality of its food, which, yeah, it just only gets better when you're hungry and you've got 100 kilometers in your legs for the day. Restaurants are amazing. Make the most of them where you can, especially when you're in the countryside where the food is much cheaper than the cities. And while en route, there are convenience stores every 10 kilometers or so. So Lawson, Family Mart, 7-Eleven, Seiko Mart in Hokkaido, these are all your friends. Convenience stores have every form of protein bar, rice-based snack, nuts or energy gel that you would ever want as a cyclist, and all sorts of other delicious snacks as well. I became completely obsessed with these banana, cream and chocolate pancakes that I think they sold at Lawson and also 7-Eleven as well, and they got me through some darker moments of the trip. You can obviously buy water and all sorts of other sports drinks at convenience stores as well, but also if you ask the cashier nicely, then they will usually fill up your water bottle if you need. I said convenience stores are basically every 10 kilometers or so. That's generally true. In more mountainous areas, they might be slightly further apart, and in Hokkaido as well, convenience stores are just a little bit further apart, so you may want to carry some more water or snacks between those stops. If you do want a more substantial meal, then find a local supermarket. They will typically have really high quality, freshly made, pre-packaged meals. And then most hotels that you'll stay at will have a microwave and a kettle to heat things up and make things like instant noodles if you need. And then final point on drinks, if you're ever running low on water and you can't find a convenience store or another good source of water, just keep your eyes peeled for a vending machine. They exist in the most obscure places. You can be cycling through the mountains for tens of kilometers or next to, rice paddies and farmland, and then all of a sudden you will see a vending machine pop up, and these will usually have a really good selection of both hot and cold drinks. How did you find accommodation? So I decided to stay in hotels pretty much the entire trip so that we could charge our cameras and we could make sure that we were warm and dry at the end of every day. There were a couple of moments where I wished I was out camping, but at the end of most days, particularly if they were long or if they were wet, I was always very glad for a good bed. Websites like booking.com will give you hotels pretty much the entire way across the country. You will pay a slight premium for it all being translated into English and serving an overseas market. So if you are feeling brave and you want to try navigating onto local websites using Google Translate, you'll likely be able to save a little bit of money across the trip. Jalan.net or Rakuten Travel are two of the most popular Japanese language websites, although they're not super user friendly. I booked most of my hotels. Well, I booked the first 10 days of hotels before I got to Japan, just so that was sorted and locked in and I didn't have to think about it while we were getting used to the distance on the bike. Once we got kind of a week into the cycle, we would then start booking our next set of hotels 3-4 days in advance, and that worked for pretty much the entire trip. There were only a couple of locations where there was fewer or there was less availability for hotels, particularly the northwest coast of Hokkaido, which is kind of the least inhabited part of Japan. That was the only place where it got a little bit tricky to find hotels at short notice. Otherwise, yeah, just booking 2, 3, 4 days in advance was perfect for our trip. Can I camp instead of staying in hotels? So I did meet a few people en route who are camping, and I've also camped on other cycles through Japan, though typically much shorter ones, and it can be a beautiful way to explore the country. There are tons of campsites across Japan, and many of them are situated in absolutely beautiful locations. If you are camping, watch out for Japan's wildlife. There are some pretty poisonous spiders, snakes, and these really evil centipedes known as mukade that you don't want to mess with. They're like jet black with bright red heads, and if they bite you, it can be really, really painful, and sometimes you do have to go to hospital. Also, the other animal you really don't want to mess with are bears, particularly in Hokkaido and the mountains of northern Honshu. If you are camping in these locations, then just keep your food away from your tent at night and store it in a bear box if the campsite has one. I didn't camp on this trip, so I don't really have specific camping spots to recommend to go with my route, but we did pass many en route, and it definitely is possible if that's what you want to do. How much did the whole trip cost? So costs will obviously vary depending on the level of luxury that you want to travel in and whether you want to dine in restaurants every night or pick up food from the local supermarket or just cook for yourself. In the countryside, you can find simple but pretty good quality business hotels for around 5,000 yen per person per night. At the other end of the spectrum, you could spend every night staying in a traditional onsen hotel with hot spring baths, and that will cost a lot more. I think my most expensive night was the temple stay I did in Koyasan, and that cost me about 30 to 35,000 yen for the night, but also included dinner, really nice breakfast, and also prayers with the monks in the morning. So that was all pretty special, and I thought quite worth it. Obviously, you are cycling, you are being very active, you will be hungry, and food does add up quite quickly. You know, often we'd get to lunch and there'd be the option of a katsu curry for 1,000 yen and a ramen for 1,000 yen, and we would just have both because we were so hungry. Then there'll be other costs like transport to and from the start and the finish, either domestic flights or trains. And if you're following a similar route to me, then you'll want to take ferries between the islands, and each ferry costs maybe 5,000 to 6,000 yen, and that includes the ticket for your bike as well. And of course, probably the biggest single expense for the entire trip will be getting to Japan in the first place, and that will largely depend on where you are flying from. When I added it all up, including flights, our trip cost a little bit more than £3,000 per person for the 27 days of cycling. I think you could probably do it for a fair bit cheaper than this if you're camping the entire time and not really going to restaurants. You could also spend far more than this if you decide you want to stay in really nice high-end hotels every single night. That's it for this guide. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found it useful. If you do have any more specific questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer if I can. And if you do end up cycling Japan or following my route through the country, even if it's just a section, please do share your journey with me. Be safe, enjoy the riding, and most of all, have fun with it. Thank you.